in Horizon 2020. I'd like to ask you one question. How many of you are from private sector? Could you just raise your hand? SME or big company? You don't know. Sorry?
SME?
SME, small and medium-sized enterprise.
Okay, small one.
Small one, okay, great. Owner, maybe? No. And the rest is from the university, correct? Almost.
Ask who's from the university.
Who's from the university?
Academy.
Oh, academy, okay.
Oh.
Public sector. Financial issues or financial guidelines for applicants in Horizon 2020. Very tough topic, very time demanding. I've got only 30 minutes and you are going to stay here for the next 6 hours. Do you know this? It's a really time consuming topic. So I'm going only slightly touch some issues which I consider the most relevant for you. And I will directly start with a small definition, or the easy one. And in the Horizon 2020 project is called action. This is something that I consider very important because you will always see research and innovation actions, coordination and support actions. What the Commission means with the action is a project. So project equal action, action equal project. And we've got the funding grades in Horizon 2020. You have to remember only 3 of them. The first one is 100%, and 100% is for all the beneficiaries. Doesn't matter whether you are from the private sector or the public sector. When you are in a research and innovation action, and the RIA, research and innovation action, is more focused on the research, whereas 70% relates to the innovation action. It more focuses on the innovation. It can have a slight touch of the research, but it's more focused on the innovation. And 70% relates to the profit organizations. So only profit organization in innovation actions will get 70% reimbursement rate or reimbursement of their funds declared in the financial statement. If you are a public institution and you are involved in innovation action, like the SME instrument or the fast track to innovation, you will anyway get 100%. And the last number, 25%, relates to the indirect costs. Was somebody of you involved in FP7 project in the past? One of you, yeah. 1, 2, okay, so somewhere. So you may remember that in FP7 you had 20% indirect cost, then you had the transitional flat rate, which was not transitional because it lasted till the end of the FP7, 60% that you had the real indirect cost. In Horizon 2020, you've got only 25%, which is calculated from the direct costs. So it's something like, I don't want to say that it's stopping up, but we're adding or increasing the easy contribution. It's not because it's used, or it should be used to cover the indirect cost, but it's something that you do not have to declare. You do not have to actually declare the indirect costs. Oh, next slide. Eligible and ineligible cost or costs. What is the difference? I've got 2 sentences on this slide, and I think they are the most important. And you have to know that each project is specific, which simply means that if you have certain costs in one project, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be eligible in another one. So something that is eligible in one cost might happen that this will not be eligible in another cost, simply because you are implementing different tasks. But anyway, we've got some general conditions which apply when we come to the eligibility of the costs, and those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conditions. So the first one is that the costs, they have to be actually incurred by the beneficiary. So you can't claim the cost or you can't declare the costs of the other partner. in the proposal? Obvious? Or in the project? Obvious. Okay. Then second condition is that the costs they have to be incurred during the duration of the action. From time to time I receive a question whether the preparation of the consortium agreement and all the costs that are related to the preparation of the consortium agreement, if they are eligible for the H2020 project, and the answer is no. Correct. Because you have to sign the consortium agreement before signing the grant agreement. So before the project starts, which means that it's not in the duration of the project. Then the costs, they have to be entered as eligible in the estimated budget of the action. And here I'd like to highlight the word estimated. Annex 2, part of the grant agreement, is estimated budget. It's just an estimation. It's not fixed budget. So it's not the same as some of you may have the experience in the structural funds. In structural funds is more or less fixed. Here is just an estimation, and you can make some transfers, some shifts between both the forms of the costs. If it is amended by the Commission, if there is an amendment, if it is approved by the Commission, and also between the cost categories, but I will touch a little bit on the budget transfers and on what the estimated budget is later in my presentation. Then the costs, they have to be connected to the action as described in Annex 1. Of course, you can't claim costs from another project, for example. So it has to be from the project that you are implementing. They have to be identifiable and verifiable. And of course, they have to be in compliance with the national legislation and with the internal procedures of your organization. So we have to follow the rules, simply. And they have to be reasonable, justified, and must comply with the principles of sound financial management, especially the economy and efficiency. Here I'd like to talk about the cost categories, but first I have to mention that we've got also something that is called forms of costs. And those forms are actually four. It's the actual cost, that's the first form, then the unit cost, lump sum, and flat rate. These are the forms of costs. And you've got different cost categories under, for example, the actual costs. Definitely under actual costs, you've got the personal costs. Then you've got the direct costs of the subcontracting, where you can't claim the indirect costs. Why? Can anybody tell me why? Does anybody know?
Okay, you could have lots of indirect costs, yes, that this subcontractor should be permanent, not just subcontractor.
Sorry?
If this subcontractor would be a partner, they would get indirect costs.
Yes, correct. Correct. So the reason why you can't claim is that he is charging price. And in the price, he should have covered all the costs plus the profit margin. But I will touch also the subcontract a little bit later in my presentation. And actually I will touch the personal costs and the subcontract only. I'm not going to talk about the other cost categories because we do not have time. But under the other direct costs, you've got the travel costs and the subsistence allowances, you've got the depreciation costs of the durable equipment and the infrastructure and the other assets, and also the costs of other goods and services, which is under the contract part, let's say. So you've got the subcontract and then you've got the contract, and contract relates to the costs of other goods and services. And here you have the consumables, dissemination costs, costs of intellectual property rights, certificate on the financial statement, which is the first level audit, and of course you've got the indirect costs. Okay, now I'd like to come back to the estimated budget. Estimated, why estimated? Because you can make some changes. What kind of changes? You can transfer money from one cost category to the other category without having the approval. Where is it? Here. Without having the approval from the European Commission. So you do not have to ask the project officer for a permission. You can do this. So if you are underspending in travel and you are overspending, let's say, under the personal costs or in the personal costs, you can use those money and you can cover your personal costs. You can also transfer money from one beneficiary to another beneficiary. But here you have to be careful because usually when you are transferring money from one beneficiary to another, you are also transferring what? What do you think? Activities. And when you are transferring activities, you are not in line with Annex 1, with the description of the action. So you have to ask the Commission for approval and for the amendment. So once you are reallocating tasks, which usually means that you are also transferring budget, then you have to have an approval. Also, when you are transferring, when you are transferring budget from one form of cost to another, it's not that easy because at least you have to have them indicated in the estimated budget. Now I'll give you an example. It's actually, there is a unit cost also for the green buildings. If I'm correct, it's called green buildings or something like that, but definitely for the clinical trials. So you still can claim actual costs for clinical trials, that's one option, but you can also use the unit costs for clinical trials. But first you have to indicate them. If you want to use them per patient, you will calculate the cost per patient for, for one, how to say, you are health and CP, you can help me.
Yeah, I'm trying what you're getting to understand.
You can go places by,
Just one exam at the doctor, let's say. So you can calculate the costs, overall costs, salary plus the consumables, and this will be unit cost. But you have to indicate this either in the estimated budget at first, or you have to ask for an amendment. If it's not indicated in the estimated budget in the Annex 1, then you have to talk to the project officer first. What you can transfer anyway, and that's why I ask if there's somebody from the private sector, especially from the SMEs, you can transfer actual personal costs to the unit costs, related to personal costs. Which simply means that if you are an SME owner without salary or natural person without salary, you can use unit costs, which the formula is 4,650 divided by 143 hours and multiplied more or less by 0.8. You will get an hourly rate, which you can then, of course, multiply by the hours worked on the project. You can claim them as the personal cost of the person that doesn't have salary. Usually in limited companies, you've got this SME owner, one-man show, one-man company, and this person can claim costs via the unit costs. So if you are thinking about spin-off, you will probably use this option, especially if you want to make spin-off at the university level, let's say. And new subcontracts. You do not have to ask the Commission for an approval if you want to implement new subcontracts, or if you want to use subcontracts, new subcontracts in implementation of the project, but it's strongly advised to ask the Commission for the approval. Because at the end, once you claim the costs, once you declare them in the financial statement, the Commission can still decide not to accept them. And why I'm talking about the rules from the, as I see it, implementation point of view, because if you want to prepare a budget, you have to know the rules. You have to know how you are going to implement the project from the financial perspective to create the budget correctly before submitting the project proposal to the evaluation. Otherwise, you are creating either a problem or a big problem. Okay, I'm going to touch a little bit the personal costs, and then, as I promised, the subcontracting. Okay, personal costs. Personal costs can be declared under direct personal costs, under direct costs of subcontracting, and also under other goods and services. And it all depends on the answers to these questions. So we've got, for example, this question. Is it an employment contract or